Wiener Schnitzel is a classic Austrian dish, and I'm making a variation of that. Usually Wiener Schnitzel includes veal or pork, but I'm gonna do a chicken version. I already got thin cut chicken breasts, but they're still a little thick. I've been desperate and pounded out chicken with a can or even a wine bottle, so you can get creative, just be careful. I like to do this just between 2 pieces of plastic wrap. You can do this in a plastic baggie. There's a lot of methods, but this is just what's easier for me. This also helps tenderize it, and it doesn't need much. These will cook up super quick because they're already so thin. Focus on those thicker parts. You want them flat and even. All right, that's about good. Don't need to pound them to death. You just need about 1/4 inch, maybe a little more. Helps it cook up really fast. Classic Wiener Schnitzel is so simple. There's really not a lot of bells and whistles to it. It's just the breading. I'm gonna add some extra flavor. The classic variation just has maybe a little bit of salt and pepper. I'm gonna do some garlic salt. I'm gonna go easy on the salt because I have a little secret swap I'm gonna do. A little mustard powder, a little pepper, some onion powder. You could add whatever you want. I've seen recipes with nutmeg, a little nutmeg in there, some warm spices. Season up that chicken, get the other side. You wanna do this ahead of time. First thing, allows this seasoning to penetrate into the meat, give it extra flavor. You can throw that chicken in the refrigerator, keep it cold. While that's sitting, I'm gonna work on my breading. Now the swap I'm doing is just using pretzels in my crust. Traditionally, you just need some simple breadcrumbs, but I love the texture and the flavor of a pretzel in this dish. So it's a good Wiener Schnitzel swap. But we're gonna go for the same texture as a breadcrumb, just with our pretzels for a little added flavor and saltiness. You can crush these up in a bag. I'm using a food processor just to pulse this, make it a little easier. You don't need a lot. Just gonna pulse this until it's a pretty fine crumb. You want a little texture there. Almost there. I want it a little finer just so it'll stick to the chicken. And there we are. Has a little bit of texture. Some fine pieces. You can crush it up a little bit more by hand. Pretzels are pretty firm and crunchy. There we go. That should be perfect. I'm gonna season up a little bit of flour with my same blend here. I'm gonna put this on a plate. You can use a shallow dish. I'm just using a plate so you can see. And then an egg wash. A little more seasoning in there. Once again, I went light on the salt for all this because pretzels are pretty salty themselves. They have the little salt crust on the outside of them. And then this on a shallow dish. You can do this in a baking dish. Any pan really works as your breading station. I'm just using some plates. The classic method is the dry hand, wet hand. I'm never good at that, so we'll see how things go. First into flour, get it well coated. Then into our egg mixture. This is usually where I use tongs just to preserve my fingers. You just need a little coating, let the excess run off, and then into our pretzels. This crust is gonna be so flavorful, a lot of texture. Wiener Schnitzel, pretzels, they kind of go together. I'm surprised this isn't how the classic recipe was developed, right? So there we go. And then just knock off any excess on a tray that can hang out while I bread the rest of them. I actually had this recipe at a restaurant once, and I was like, this is so clever. You have a pretzel crusted Wiener Schnitzel? I was like, that sounds so good. So had to make my own version of it at home. Now this is a classic technique for breading just about anything. It's the flour, the egg mixture, and some kind of crumb topping. That could be panko, pretzels, it can be whatever. Doesn't have to be just plain breadcrumbs. And I encourage you, when you get in the kitchen, get a little messy, get your hands in there. Cooking's not supposed to be pretty and perfect. And your greatest utensils in the kitchen are what? Your hands. This was a perfect amount for 3. There's that last one. Let's do this last cutlet with some just regular breadcrumbs. You can do the same process even with chicken tenders. This really is just a technique that you can adapt with just about anything, but you don't have to make this complicated. It can be super, super simple. This is classic schnitzel breading. Thin, crispy layer of pretty fine breadcrumbs. If you have some bread that's about to go bad, I'll toast it for a little bit in the oven until it's a little bit more crunchy, and then I'll blend it up in the food processor. There you go, you have your own breadcrumbs. I'm gonna clean up and get to cooking. Adding in some oil, just letting that come up to temperature a little bit. You don't need much, just maybe a tablespoon or 2 to coat the bottom. So I do this over medium heat. I don't want the crust to burn, so you wanna kinda cook it on medium so the chicken can cook through without the breading burning before then. There we go, just a gentle sizzle, and we will get our pretzel crusted schnitzels in the pan. And you really can just let it sit for a few minutes. Let that crust develop and that breading set. Let the chicken cook through, of course. Oh, the smells so good. All right, I feel that chicken firming up. I'm just taking a peek at the bottom, seeing if it's crispy. This is the point where I don't want a lot of oil in this, but if I notice that the breading and the chicken's soaking up a little bit of oil, you can always add just a little dash more. So there we go, a nice golden brown. Give this one a flip. Now you want to be really careful with your tongs. There's a tendency to kind of scrape off all the breading while you're cooking it. So you want to be really gentle. You want to kind of only flip it once, maybe twice, just to make sure everything's cooked through. Because you pounded it very thin, it should cook up really nice and juicy pretty quick. Another reminder, use all your senses in the kitchen. The smell's good. The browning's working out really nicely. Some pans, and depending on your stove, have hot spots, so I tend to keep things moving around just so everything cooks nice and evenly. Don't want to handle it too much, but kind of want to adapt to your cooking situation in your pan. I saw a trick that if you add a little bit of salt to your oil, it'll help absorb moisture and prevent splattering, so we're gonna try this out. It's still sizzling a little bit, but I actually think it's helping. Ooh, nice and brown on the bottom. Yes. Perfecto. Let's get these out of here. Now what I do is I collect any crumbs because we don't want those to burn. You don't have to clean the pan, but just get any of those dark brown bits, transfer them to a plate or discard them. We're gonna start on round 2. Anytime you're starting a new batch, just let that oil come up to temp first. Give it a few seconds and see if it helps. All right, next batch going in. And then our classic breaded one. Get that oil moved around, make sure every part of the chicken is coated. And this is when you wanna be really gentle because that crust on that first side hasn't set up yet. So you wanna just leave it alone, let it cook, let it crisp up, and then we'll check it in a few minutes. Usually what I do if I'm doing a frying process, just so these don't get cold, so they can remain nice and crispy and juicy, I'll throw these in the oven about, 275, 300, just to keep them warm and crispy if I just need them to sit for a minute. So I'm actually gonna do that. When you're pan frying, color is a great indicator of when to flip. So I'm gonna go against my rules and kind of show this to you. So this is lightly golden brown. We start to get some dark brown edges. This needs to go a little longer. Chicken breasts are really juicy, so you wanna lock in that juice. So letting that coating, letting that breading set and crisp up is gonna keep that juice in. If you use traditional breadcrumbs, the texture is gonna be a lot finer, a lot softer. I like the pretzel crusted. You get a lot of texture, a lot of crunch. All right, I think this one's ready for a flip. Look at that. Crispy, nice color. I am gonna give this one a flip. Oh, there we go, nice color. Even with the tongs, I can tell that there's some crispiness and firmness on this side. So depending on your burner and the pan, you'll see that it's darker on this side. So I'm gonna rotate this when I flip it back over to just crisp up on the other side. It must have just had not quite a hot spot, a cold spot, if you will. Good indicator that the chicken is done is I usually just press on it lightly. It's pretty firm. When you pick it up, if it doesn't slump in, pretty much means you're good to go. Also remember that there's carryover cooking time. Once this comes out of a hot pan, it'll continue to cook for a few minutes. So if you don't want overcooked dry chicken, I usually pull it just a little early, let it rest, let those juices redistribute. This one looks great. I'm gonna get this one out of here. Ooh, see, there we go. Nice and brown on the bottom. Gonna give that 10 more seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. Ta-da! We did it. We did it together. All right, there's our last one. Look how gorgeous those are. These look great, they smell great. I call these practical schnitzels because if you get traditional Wiener Schnitzel at a restaurant or out, they're like the size of this plate. They're huge. So this is like, an appropriate serving. Now, most schnitzels are served with some parsley on top. So I have some parsley right here, little green, little color, and lemon. But there you have it, pretzel crusted schnitzel, the same process as a classic schnitzel, just with a little remix. So I usually like mine with a little mustard. You use any sauce you want, a little squeeze of lemon. Since this rested a little bit, it should be nice and juicy and tender on the inside. Oh, look at all that juice. Little mustard for me. That's really delicious. Incredibly good, crunchy. You get that pretzel flavor. I love the texture, so good. It's our traditional schnitzel, our traditional practical schnitzel. Let's dig into this one. That seasoning blend works really great with this. That little bit of mustard powder has a little tang in it, and with the added mustard on the side is really good. I feel like that Vince McMahon meme. You cannot go wrong with the traditional breading. Those light breadcrumbs, they're crispy, a little salty, super savory, super delicious. Prost!